Trauma and impact on a relationship. Good afternoon. My name is Elham, and my topic today for my TED Talk is trauma and impact on a relationship. This is a very serious topic that I strongly feel people do not talk about as much. Maybe because they don't have all the answers or a lot of information, but hey, I don't either, but I'll try my best to inform the intended audience of the effects and the situations that are usually taking place when there is some sort of either past trauma, recent trauma, maybe just abuse that has caused trauma in a relationship. Where should I start? There are many different kinds of trauma that can affect people. If I started talking about each and every single trauma that there could be, I would never stop talking. I will keep it brief. There is emotional trauma that a person could be facing, which usually affects their mental health and how they put themselves out there. All of the traumas are bad, but personally, I feel like emotional trauma and mental trauma would be the worst kind of trauma, and it does take longer to heal. Moving on to physical trauma. This can include anything you have witnessed or physically have been abused by. This can cause a lot of disconnection between you and your partner because you might be angry at them and take everything personally, or you might be very distant, which could also ruin a relationship if no communication was made. Trauma is not a light subject, I know it is hard for some people to understand, or they don't know how to help someone who has some sort of traumatic experience, which is totally fine because that is why I am here to provide you the information and details on how to help and how to know if someone is going through these symptoms or situations. According to Science Direct, 65 treatment receiving adults were assessed on measures of dissociation, state and trait shame, behavioral responses to shame, and trait guilt, complex PTSD symptom severity, and relationship difficulties. This topic is never spoken about, and we never actually know what these tests actually mean and how serious they actually are. 95% scored above cutoff for complex PTSD. You might ask how complex PTSD impacts the relationship, which is an excellent question to ask. Complex PTSD has significant consequences for intimate relationships. A correlation network analyst showed that some types of trauma are more likely to co-occur, and that especially traumatic experiences in attachment relationships during childhood were significantly associated with other trauma in life. Trauma does not only mean that it has to be an extremely brutally powerful event or life-threatening for it to be described as traumatic. It has to have a powerful impact on the individual, such as intense fear, helplessness, or horrors. A traumatic stress reaction has been triggered off a brewing storm of emotional disturbances mixed together, not knowing what the eventual outcome will be. Traumatic events have been described as violent encounters with nature, technology, or humankind. According to Tan, a raw feeling of either loss, grief, anger, sadness, helplessness, shame, guilt, fear, disassociation, flashbacks, nightmares, and exaggerated startle responses forms itself into distinct conditions such as PTSD and depression. A trauma experience can be operationalized in multiple ways, as I have said before. Trauma-related quality, and stress can undermine relationships, processes, and quality, and it can also enhance relationship post-traumatic growth, which leaves partners vulnerable in the face of trauma-related stress. It is not a bad thing to be vulnerable, but if not talked about and the proper care is not done, then it could really impact the individual and the partner. By learning about trauma and its impact on relationships, there might be a better chance to save the relationship, or if needed, then to cut off the relationship. The plan is for both individuals to be open and honest with each other, and most importantly, being true yourself and having a healthy relationship where you don't feel like you are any less important than they are. What are some ways you can help couples who are experiencing any of these symptoms, you may ask? Let me tell you. Listening to their problems can always help and guide someone who is confused and feels alone. Sharing your own personal experience can also help them open up to you or decide to get help. Building up their self image is also great for them to realize they don't need the other person. Never judge someone who is telling you something personal, no matter how small or unimportant you think it is. Make sure they know you are always there for them and you are only a phone call away. Check in with them all the time and see how well they are doing or if there is any progress. And lastly, be honest with them. A time where I can relate to this is when I go to Toronto, I see a lot of abusive boyfriends, and the girlfriends just look drained. The things that is gonna go through with her and is gonna be carried on with her forever. No one steps in, no one helps her. Everyone just minds their own business, acting as if they see nothing. It's ridiculous. A teenage girl suffering from traumatic experiences and she can't leave, and no one will jump in to save her. Always be aware of the signs and always jump in and help. I was young when I saw this, and when I did point it out to my parents, they said, shh, and kept walking as if they saw nothing. I know it is hard to stand up for others, especially in situations like this, when you are scared. But how my parents reacted really made me want to do better now and act differently than they did. In conclusion, trauma and impact on a relationship is a very serious matter and should never be taken lightly. Reach out to your friends and family, even if you don't think they are in a toxic relationship. You never know what could be going on when you are not around. Make sure people around you know you're there and are always free and open to talk. Talking can really benefit people in these relationships. Don't be a bystander. Always appreciate everything around you, and there are always people who can help. If they're like therapists, couples therapy, or couples counseling, and hotlines for past or recent traumas. No matter what kind of trauma it is, there's always help. Trauma has a lot of effects and can affect others in many ways, and these situations can always look different. No trauma is less important than another or less serious than another. The impact of traumas can really affect and disconnect with relationships. Often people decide that they are not the problem and it is their partner, but in reality, it could be the other way around. They could think they are not the issue, but the impact can be the issue, or it could be both of them that are the issue. Thank you for listening to my TED Talk and have a wonderful night.